So back in 2018, there was a guy that breached Nintendo servers, and he basically got like 2.54 terabytes. Now, if you don't know what a terabyte is, it's basically like 1024 gigabytes worth of data from Nintendo. Most of the stuff was Pokemon stuff. And this is actually kind of something that really, this is where this whole thing really began with this Pokemon prototype data. See, I had nothing to do with any of this, but I was just like anybody else that was just stumbling across stuff on the internet and investigating it for his own reasons. And this is why I'm still trying to figure out this prototype data. If anybody's ever wondering, like, where did I get this idea? Where did I come from this stuff at? Where did I get it at? Basically, it was already leaked on the internet. Some of it was, but most of it we're still looking for. In this video, hopefully we can kind of explain it a little bit better. So basically, back in 2018 and then obviously 2022, we're still trying to find some of this data, and as well as whatever those 2.54 terabytes of data that was leaked onto the public domain, the internet in this case. Zamnis Clark, I believe, was his name, but that's all public information now, so it's not something we don't already know. But for the people that don't know, what happened was when he got that data, he also entrusted it secretly to a lot of other people, and there's still a lot of data there that a lot of people haven't gone through. Now, this isn't just for Pokemon, this is other games included, the same GigaLeaks that slowly have been updated, that Nintendo, like when people found out Luigi, for example, was actually supposed to be in Super Mario 64. It was true. It was just Super Mario 64 was supposed to have multiplayer options. Kind of interesting. And you obviously had those ROM hacks people found, so they were able to reverse engineer it somehow their own way. But it's interesting, though. So Pokemon is no different. Pokemon obviously had a lot of content that was scrapped, but a lot of the stuff that the Helix Chamber got. You see, what happened was when the Helix Chamber actually released their assets, it wasn't fake. It was real. But it's like they just took the wrong first impression trying to explain it to people, and that's what happened at the time. But once the word got out that, yeah, it actually came from Game Freak's, you see, what they did was they took prototype assets that were from a compiled version of the game, and then they decided to recreate it, but like using the same assets that they got. So it's not all fan made, but it is real though. So what happened was, because again, even in the final version of Pokemon, it's kind of strange how like Professor Oak's data was there, some of the evolutions that some of the Pokemon got scrapped, more moves that we don't even know about that exist. But if you go back and look at some of the trading card games, Pokemon cards, you can actually see some of those moves were actually in Gen 1's prototype, and then eventually in Gen 2. It's actually very interesting. I think all the moves that were carried over from Gen 1 would eventually find their way into Gen 2 if they didn't. Some of the moves were scrapped, sure, but or maybe reworked into something else, but were replaced by something else, So it's interesting to think. Just trying to figure out like what's what and where everything is. But yeah, I think a lot of these moves really did end up in the same location. So basically this is what we're trying to figure out right now. How much more prototype data is missing? And where can we find it at if it does exist? Well, the closest thing I can think of would be the source code. The original red and blue, not red and blue, red and green, and not going based on red and green as in like, the same red version that was released outside of Japan. The original red and green, that's the international, or not the international, the original red and green that was never released outside of Japan. That's the 1.0 version of Pokemon. So that would explain a lot then. So, but basically this is what also happened though, going back to the GigaLeaks. Somebody has the data out there right now, but they're still looking into it, I'd imagine, along with all the other data they've been entrusted. Now, this isn't uncommon. It's kind of, think of it like a secret society, and I'm not talking politics, but, like a secret society. There's tons of people out there working underground, and there's more than what meets the eye, basically, So they're researching this stuff, still concluding it somehow, and then they're gradually releasing it into like a decoy or something. that, so they don't get busted for it, basically. But I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest that, eventually we get the source code for the original Pokemon Green. And then it becomes a question, what else are we not seeing there? You know what I mean? Like, does it have the rest of the data that was actually originally cut from the games? That would be interesting, because I think it's true. Gen 1 was without a doubt supposed to be a lot longer than Gen 2 was. And even then, see, some of the stuff that wasn't in Gen 1 was carried over to Gen 2. But even Gen 1 and Gen 2's prototype that we found so far, there was a lot of stuff that wasn't even in those final games that were cut, scrapped. Same thing with Gen 3, Gen 4, Gen 5, Gen 6, Gen 7, Gen 8, Gen 9, and etc. And I know Gen 9 just is going to be coming out, but it's going to be very interesting when we see just all the stuff that most people don't know about. What gets cut, what didn't. And all the side games, too, if you really want to get into it. Prototype games, I remember a lot of people were saying, there was that was canceled Pokemon Pictocross, and then somebody leaked the actual game because it was never released. Even in Japan, it wasn't released, believe it or not. It's actually interesting how somebody, they had this game still stored on their servers and all that, somewhere in Nintendo, because when you're a software company, you got to keep track. You're going to keep like records, archives of so much stuff, stuff that most people don't even know about. But it does make you wonder why they don't include this stuff, because if it's like, if somebody designs something but you're going to limit it based on purpose, then it really does make me wonder what they recycled it into later on if they took that same concept for something else. Again, we've learned a lot about Nintendo over the years, so it kind of makes you wonder what really is going on. So, anyways, so when Pokemon, so when Gen 1 came out, there was 151 Pokemon originally. Well, there was actually 191, supposedly. And then there was reason to believe that there was 300 designs. Now, what were those Pokemon? Or what could they have been? That's a good question, because I don't know. And here's something else, and here's even more of a cliffhanger for you. Okay, so when Gen 2's prototype came out, the very first beta Pokemon was actually a Pokemon named Celebi, the beta Celebi, and it started at 300 index number. So Gen 1 technically would have had 299 Pokemon in it, and that's something to think about. What Pokemon were those? Because again, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. We're still missing index numbers 192 all the way up to 299, at least. And I think I have an idea what the other ones are that we are missing. So maybe if we get some prototype data, we can actually confirm all of it's true. We can get the front sprites that, people say allegedly don't exist. But now I'm actually finding even more information that, and again, I'll post this in the video, in the description, so you can read this for yourself if you want to. But I swear I've read this over multiple times, and I swear I'm reading this right. But it's like the assets that Helix Chamber got not only were real, obviously, but when they went back and redid all the sprites, like the front sprites for some of the Pokemon, they did it carefully. And that was the one thing that always confused me, because I was always wondering, like, how did they get that interpretation based on the back sprites? And it's very possible that the guy who was sharing actually had the original source code. So it's out there. But based on what we know, based on the public, though, and not too many people know this, is that it's very possible that they were copying it from the real source code, but they just weren't, or something like that. And it makes me wonder why they just didn't release the rest of it, or maybe he didn't want to. Maybe there was only so much he was willing to give out for whatever reason. So that would explain why they had partial prototype data, but it also would explain why they probably were able to make the front sprites, the Pokedex entries, the way they did, because those Pokemon would have to have existed somehow. So they did it carefully and created it, not based on their own interpretation, but based on something that they had, rather than just giving the data to them, but he was telling it to them verbally. Which is true. It's still legit, though. But it's interesting nonetheless, though. It kind of makes me wonder, because what we're at right now. The one thing I always thought was just really strange about Pokemon was that Mewtwo's in Cerulean Cave was actually Moltres' dungeon, and Professor Oak in a boss rush was at the end of Gen 1. That would actually explain why in Gen 2, like if you actually play the 1997 Space World demo, of Gold and Silver, that would explain why you could actually rematch every single trainer. Or, I'm sorry, rematch the gym leaders and all that after you beat the Elite Four. And it's actually very interesting how they did that. So it's nonetheless, it makes you really think about what is really canon that isn't, but at the same time, though, what ideas changed and what is true. You know, some wild stuff people have. That's why these prototype maps really matter to me, because it's like, what was Pokemon originally before it was changed, you know? Especially a series a lot of people have played, you know? So it's not just the story of the games, but it's also how it came to be that really makes you want to know more, you know? Because obviously there is more, but we just don't know what that is. And that's why, you know, I get a lot of views for this stuff too, so I'm actually interested in it if I can find something that nobody else knows about. So anyways, so yeah, so basically somebody hacked Nintendo back in 2018. A bunch of data is out there still. They're still slowly leaking it, obviously. So it is real. It is out there. And this would explain why Helix Chamber got what they did. But they just went about explaining it wrong because they wanted to really show it off. They wanted to really surprise people with it. But they should have just came out and said, hey, you know what? Here's some leaked assets that we got from somebody. But they probably didn't want to get sued, so I can understand that. But I don't think you really would get sued. You'd have a better chance of not getting sued if somebody else already leaked it, because you wouldn't have been the original leaker, and they obviously, but even the guy who hacked Nintendo didn't get jail time from what I understand. Like, it was, they couldn't really, but he's not on the internet as far as I'm aware, at least. Something like that. But it's actually very interesting what to say, though. So anyways, yeah, if we do find more data, it's going to be out there at some point. But what is missing, what isn't missing, but this is basically just to confirm it, you know, the story of, you know, what really happened here, you know, does it really exist? Yes, it does. It's just, they're just hiding it very thoroughly, though. So yeah. Hopefully we can find what those other Pokemon moves are, what those other Pokemon look like, and if we can find even more information. I was looking at Cryothin stats not too long ago, and for some strange reason, I always used to say it was a legendary. It's possible that Cryothin could have been what Dragonite was originally supposed to be as far as its stats, but a special dragon. I think they still had the premise that Dragonite was actually supposed to be a legendary, so its stats are like super, super high. But at the same time, though, you know, obviously Dragonite's a pseudo legendary, you know. Pseudo means like fake, meaning like it's not well known yet. But I don't think that's really 100% true because, you know, if you think about it, I mean, Dragonite is a strong Pokemon, no doubt. You know, but obviously, you know, it's got ×4 against, you know, ice attacks because it's a flying and a dragon type. So it's, you know, it can be weak though. It can be very there. It has to have its balancing issues. But if you use Dragonite, well, you know, Dragonite's a pretty strong Pokemon. And to think that, see, what really got me, another interesting concept I thought about Pokemon was that, like, you could catch more than one legendary Pokemon because it's just a rare species. You know, I mean, you see it in the anime. There's more than one Zapdos. There's more than one Articuno. There's more than one Moltres. More than one Lugia. More than one Ho-Oh. Maybe not more than one Ho-Oh, but you know, other trainers using other legendary Pokemon. Like how they got it, yes, that's debatable, but you know what I mean though. You see more than one legendary of a species. You know, it's not just that one only Pokemon. So it's really interesting to think because what really gets me is they had this concept that there were more than 5 legendary Pokemon. Arcanine was originally a legendary Pokemon. All of the Dragonair, Dratini, Dragonair, and Dragonite were all originally legendary Pokemon. And this would make sense because, you know, you could catch them somewhere. Now, would their location still have been the same, the Safari Zone and the Rocket Casino? Now, if you're playing the original Pokemon, what I recommend doing, I swear to God, I recommend this. If you're going to get Dratini, go to the Rocket Casino, save in front of the game, and just kind of keep resetting until you get like a really high physical attack, because that's what Dratini's really got. good. If you can get high enough that, and you can get that Dragonite, believe me, that Dragonite will be useful later on. So basically, I would still consider Dragonite to be a legendary Pokemon as much as Arcanine is a legendary Pokemon now. Because its stats are just crazy high. Like, it's a really good Pokemon, especially if you get the right TMs for it, rather. What else? Pseudo legendaries, but it's just not well known, So they're still debating it, rather. But I think it's really interesting though, because it makes me wonder how much stronger they would have been. And let's see here, like Cryathin, its special attack is obviously higher than Dragonite's. It's a kimono dragon, basically. If you don't know, Indonesia, the Indonesians have kimono dragons, real life Pokemon, or a real life. It's a giant lizard, basically. And while it doesn't fly, but if you're really interested in seeing like the concept, like go look at those kimono dragons in real life and really study like what they look like, how they behave, what they eat. You'll be very surprised at like kind of where they got the concept for Cryathin. But just imagine it's a water dragon instead of it just looks like a giant lizard, basically. It's kind of funny though, because when you usually think of dragons, they shoot flames, but this one can actually use water type moves and ice, as well as dragon type moves. It kind of makes me wonder how many more dragon type moves would have been in the prototype. I mean, we got Mega Fire, but that was scrapped. That was eventually, I do believe they recycled it into Dragon's Breath, because it makes sense, because that's in Gen 2, and Claire gives it to you, so, that would explain why Kingdra was able to have Dragon's Breath as well as Outrage. And Outrage, I believe, is stronger, and it was a special type move. So that was it's always a problem dealing with Kingdra, because Kingdra's a bastard, sort of. I don't know. Did Kingdra have Outrage? I think it did. But anyways, so Kingdra was a water and a dragon type, I do believe. So yeah. Anyways, but yeah, it does make me wonder though, what other Pokemon, like Cryathin could have easily killed Dragonite very easily, because you would have been able to, because if you were to teach Gen 1 Dragon type moves, there's special type moves in Gen 1 if you didn't know. Aside from Dragon Rage, it obviously does 40 damage regardless. So, and because Gen 1 Dragon type moves are actually super effective against Dragon types, that would have easily killed Dragonite. Especially because Dragonite's special defense is, well, special attack and special defense in Gen 1 are the same. So, Dragonite's special defense is pretty good, actually, but it's not, it's not as high as, Cryathin's. It would have been just a little lower, but Cryathin's special attack is like just a little low of its special attack, but it's like almost 300 capped, almost. Not base, but it's, but on level 100 with the highest 15 DVs, I believe it was like almost, just a little under 300, but that's before you start adding in the, I believe, if my math is right, I'm trying to think if the EVs weren't added already for the effort values weren't added already for, which is 62, I believe. I have to double check, but it just blew my mind that a Pokemon could have like high stats like that in Gen 1. I mean, I guess that explains why Charizard was always able to have like 300 and HP and all that. Because, your EVs for the first two generations could be 62 possible, like 255 effort values for like every single stat. Instead of like what they did in Gen 3 where they broke it down a little bit more, that you could only have like 252 for two stats, and then a 6, which would add up to 510 if my math is right. And then you had the nature that would divide it by a 0.1 advantage, or if it was neutral, to add more of a variety, rather, really make the metrics add up a little bit. So it's interesting. So they kind of didn't do like the same thing that like Fire Emblem did, where like you're fighting someone with max stats that's from the same trainer class, so as long as they have the same weapon, they're doing the same damage, and as long as they don't miss, and it really would just be whoever goes first wins, basically. It's kind of like what they're trying to avoid with Pokemon. So they wanted people to really think about the Pokemon they're using, the Pokemon moves they're using, and the stats that they have. So kind of something to think about, really, the natures, and then it makes sense. So there's a huge variety there. So that would explain why Pokemon took the approach that it did. They were trying to balance, like, so like when they say that that's why Pokemon was about balancing and everything, that's why it really did what it did. But yeah, so I do think that that would have been interesting if they would have done that with Pokemon, as far as like all the Pokemon they would have put in the games. Like, how many more legendary Pokemon could there have been based on their stats, based on their stories, based on, you know, because you can catch more than one Cryathan in the Pokemon games. And yeah, well, first of all, you can't catch Cryathan. You have to go catch a Skimper, evolve it into a Beluga, and then finally Cryathan. But Cryathan was like a tank, man. That Pokemon couldn't die. You could teach it water moves, you could teach it ice moves, you could teach it. God, man, I wish that Pokemon was in the final version. I mean, I know the most likely outcome was they took the concept of that and turned it into Sobble, which I do believe that. But as far as Beluga and Cryathan go, they probably reworked it into something else. But I would love to see a Komodo Dragon water dragon type. And I know there's a lot of dragons in Pokemon, but another water dragon type would actually be very interesting. I'd be interested. It'd really be interesting to see like what they do with it. Because in Gen 1, here's the thing: water types were actually nullified against ice type, or their normal damage. You can use ice type moves on a normal type. That's why I always thought Gyarados was a dragon. And that was super effective against it, but it was never a dragon type. It's kind of weird. But then they also, what's even weirder is one of the scrap moves they had, I mentioned before, they had a Dry Freeze. You know, Articuno would have learned it. And if you don't know, Dry Freeze was introduced in, I believe, Gen 6. It was a move that was super effective against water type moves. It was an ice attack that was super effective against water type moves. And it would kill everything. It basically would kill everything against water type. It would freeze it, and it wasn't a one-hit kill, but it was, if your Pokemon was strong enough, though, you know, it would actually be super effective against water types. So that would have been cool. That would have been like the easiest way to kill Cryathan very easily, because then it would be a time swore against it, and because it's a water and a dragon, and that would easily knock it out. Because that Pokemon's it's super effective against ice type moves against it, but its special attack is so high it can survive. So you have to watch out for that. So that's interesting. But Lance had one though. Lance originally had one. That would explain why that would explain the two Pokemon. That explains why he had a Gyarados and an Aerodactyl. He wasn't supposed to have those Pokemon, but he had prehistoric Pokemon that were from the prehistoric dinosaur days. That would explain why. That would also explain why he had Charizard. You know, Charizard's not a dragon-type Pokemon. Why does he got a Charizard? Why does he have a Gyarados? Why does he have an Aerodactyl? You know what I mean? They were Pokemon from prehistoric times, you know, just about. Or based on prehistoric, they had to do the next best thing. That's why people always wondered that. Why did they make some of the decisions they did in Pokemon? Because they had to compensate for something else. But that was not their original design. See, in the original Gen 1 prototype, Lance had 5 Pokemon. He had a Dratini, I know. He had a Beluga. Again, that's the Pokemon evolves from Cryathan that we know of. And then you had Cryathan itself. You had the Dragonite that he had. And I believe he had a Dragonair. So wait, was that 3? 1, 2. No, he had 2 Belugas. Sorry. Maybe I'm wrong. I had to double check. No, he had Dragonite. Dratini. I have to double check, but I know he had all dragons though. Dragonair, Dragonite, 2 Belugas. 2 Belugas. Maybe 2 Belugas, and I know 4 of them off the top of my head, but it's either another Beluga or it was another Dragonair, I believe, or something like that. It's a dragon Pokemon. They were all dragon types. I swear to God, they were all dragon types. But it's something though, you know. Obviously, he uses Cryathan last, and then he switches to you know, then he uses the Almighty Dragonite. But again, if you have dragon type moves, and water type moves, or not water type, but ice type. It basically was easy. It was still easy early on. His dragons were actually even a little bit weaker too, as far as levels. And then they had the concept that your rival had like all three starters, and then obviously he didn't have Blastoise. He had Turtle, the one Pokemon that Squirtle would have originally finally evolved into Wartortle. But it is interesting. I actually do wonder what happened to where Lapras would have been caught, because Lapras originally wouldn't have been given to you at the Silph Co. He would have actually, they would have given you a Pokemon called Omega, which was the Mecha Godzilla, which is what Blastoise originally would replace, as well as Mew. And then, of course, there was a couple other Pokemon that, a couple water turtles that were scrapped. Well, one of them was scrapped. And then, of course, that's what Squirtle would, they would move Blastoise over to Squirtle. That explains why, like, why Blastoise had all the arm cannons that it did and all that, because it looked like a Mechoid, but it's not a machine though. You know what I mean? It's just a Mecha Godzilla, but a giant tortoise with the guns on its back. It's stuck though. You know what I mean? Like, that's why I don't blame Game Freak for like wanting to vote on that. They thought, like, I mean, you got Squirtle, who's based on a turtle and a squirrel. That's adorable. And then what's its final evolution? It's basically a mechanoid Godzilla and all that. It's like even in Pokemon Stadium, every time you send Blastoise out, his cannons come out and he's looking off to one side. He's like all like happy and everything, just like seeing that he's got these arm cannons and all that. So it's like, it's interesting how they how the animation department must have felt like when they were animating all this stuff back in the day, because I just think that's pretty cool how they actually, man, they put so much effort into it, But it makes me wonder how many ideas they really would have had, and it says something else too, because if Red never would have got Lapras from if he never would have got the Godzilla from or he never would have got Lapras from the Silph Co when he stopped Giovanni there for the second time. It's actually interesting because it's possible that he could have had an Omega instead of a Lapras. But then again, what's actually very interesting is he probably already does in a way, because he's using Blastoise, because that's what Omega would have been. It's also strange to think that, imagine if he had Tortle instead of Blastoise, and then he had a Mecha Godzilla, but it was a giant Silph Co robot to protect the Silph Co. So what would have been interesting is Blastoise wouldn't have been a water type. It would have been an electric fighting, I believe. Or no, it's all pure electric, sorry. But it's also kind of like, maybe it could have been a steel type if it was in Gen 2. Interesting. But here's the thing, here's something else that's interesting. When Blastoise's type advantage was actually introduced back in Gen 1's prototype, it was actually a ground and a water type. They obviously took that concept and recycled it for Swampert. But what's really interesting is back when Gen 1 was released, it was a water type, and then obviously you had Charizard was a flying and a fire type, and then Venusaur was a poison and a grass type, which is actually kind of interesting how Venusaur, and well, but what's also really crazy is Tortle was actually a water and a fighting type, so every single starter Pokemon in Gen 1 would have dual type advantages somehow. So that's actually kind of interesting, really. So it's just, again, I really want to know how much different Pokemon really would have been if they never would have scrapped any of this stuff, because it really does make you think, like, what concepts that we haven't seen have been led to believe by the game designers that Pokemon really is just that. It's a series that somebody made, but they had to tread lightly on some stuff, and it makes me wonder what they really recycled it into and how many other ideas have been scrapped. But the only way to really tell is based on prototypes. So if we can get our hands on that, we can really sew it out there. But like, this should just kind of give like a list of ideas, though, what we're looking for, and much more, of course. And the story that, yeah, there's still hope out there, that yes, there is definitely more out there, because there's no way we found all of it. So if we can find it, then yeah, that'll be interesting when someone leaks it. But hopefully we can find it soon, so that might explain the story a little bit more. But again, I'll leave the story in the description. This is what a lot of people already know, but if you're not somebody who does know this, just kind of go ahead and read it really carefully. And if you have any other questions, just ask me. I'll be glad to tell you. But this is what I'm looking for still. And if anybody can find the original, not the Gen 1 source code, that's usually the one that they're talking about, the international red and blue. But the original red and green that was released, that's the one we're looking for. So if you can find that, then let me know. But yeah, I'm sure a lot of other people would know that too if it got leaked. So we'll have to wait and see if anybody has it, and then figure out, like, contrast wise, like what's left to be said. So we'll have to really see how much different Pokemon was, at least as far as, you know, if they included it in the games, we can at least figure out what the beta Pokemon were, and maybe the rest of them moves, and then maybe what the front sprites would have looked like if the ones that we did get are based on prototype data that they just didn't release. So we'll see how accurate that really is. But again, subscribe. If you want to send me something, you can. I got a link in the description, or just message me on Discord. We can work something out. But I'll just keep looking. Anything I usually get, I just put back into this channel anyway. So that's just to help out somehow.